sorry for the delay. Welcome to Beyond Health Hack. My name is Nicholas and I'm your moderator for tonight's session. So before we start, I would like to ask everyone to keep themselves muted if you have not. If you have any questions during the event, there are two ways you can raise them. Firstly, there's a raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, which will enable me to invite you onto the stage to ask your questions to the speaker directly. If not, you can also type in your questions in the Q&A tab on the right. Our question IC will be filtering through them, and the most relevant or upvoted questions will be asked first. Also, do take note that priority will be given to those who would like to come out on stage to ask their questions directly, as we want to make the session as interactive as possible. So back to the main program. Tonight's session is our first Founders Club. And if you didn't know, Founders Club is a 5-part series where we invite 5 different entrepreneurs from HealthTech startups to share their journeys with you guys. And for tonight, our guest speaker is Mr. Wayne Wee, co-founder, head of business development and strategy of Breathonix. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Wee.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Mr. Wee, before we start taking questions from the floor, could you give us a quick introduction about yourself and Breathonix?
Yeah, sure. So actually, the company Breathonix, our mission is to develop non-invasive breath tests for disease detection. So actually, how the company started was when our CEO, Dr. Jia Zunan, she was doing her PhD in lung cancer research. And because of the whole COVID situation, basically the clinical trials for all the lung cancer was being suspended, and the natural progression was basically to repurpose the technology for COVID detection, and that's how basically the company pivoted into doing breath analysis for COVID-19. And as for myself, I actually joined the team slightly after the company actually incorporated. I got to know Dr. Jia Zunan as well as Tu Fang, who are the CEO and COO. Through the NUS Overseas College network, because Tu Fang himself is also a NOC alumni, and I got to know of this opportunity because I actually expressed interest that I wanted to work on a like an idea similar to what Breathonix was working on, and I saw that they were also looking out for another fellow co-founders to help them push the technology forward, and so that's how I actually got on board with the Breathonix team.
All right. Thank you for sharing your inspirational journey with us, Mr. Wee. And it's extremely amazing how you managed to achieve such a feat, considering how volatile our current economic climate is. And personally, as someone who has went through the conventional nasopharyngeal swab test, I think that the experience is not a pleasant one. And I remember when I saw your company's product on the news, I was extremely happy and relieved that there is now a less invasive method to screen for COVID-19. And just a fun fact for everyone, as of 17 May 2021, Breathonix's Breathonix Go COVID-19 breath test system gained the HSA provisional approval, and the system is currently deployed at the Tuas checkpoint and are being trialed in parallel with the existing antigen rapid tests. Yep. So now we'll be moving on to the Q&A session. Just let me check the Q&A. Okay, there are no questions coming in yet, but we have a few prepared questions for you. So my first question for you, Mr. Wee, is why did your organization choose this technology as your core idea, given the widespread availability of other tested and proven COVID-19 screening methods?
Yeah. So as mentioned earlier, actually, the technology itself was being developed for early detection of lung cancer through your breath, and yeah, because all these basically the clinical trials for lung cancer was being suspended because all the hospital were basically prioritizing their resources for COVID-19 research, and that's why we kind of repurposed the technology to do COVID-19 breath tests instead.
I see. Because of the COVID changing the economic landscape, so it was important for many businesses to try and adapt to the changes. And I'm very happy to hear that your company has come up with this system, which I believe will benefit a lot of people. Yep. So let's move on to the next question. As a fairly young organization, how did your organization perform your needs testing and validation to build a strong foundation for your solutions?
Yeah, so I think we were really fortunate to have a lot of different key partners to come in. I think for one is the university, the NUS, who provided us with the initial kind of resources and including R&D equipment, manpower, as well as the relevant connections. So they actually connected us, with the different clinical partners that we could potentially work with for COVID. And we were also very fortunate in the sense that we were able to connect with NCID to do the clinical trials in Singapore, as well as we got connected with the Dubai Health Authority to do the clinical trial in Dubai. And basically, both of these clinical trial was being sponsored by the government of the two countries.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Wee. And I also think that finding areas that can help build a strong foundation for businesses is very important. And because of COVID, there were fears of bleak investments and the economic climate was very bad as many people were speculating mass closures. But now it seems that it has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies and led the evolution of businesses and industry, like how you mentioned that your organization used to focus on the lung cancer detection of lung cancer using breath, but because of COVID, the business has been in a way forced to adapt to the changes and focus on COVID-19 instead. So while some startups have thrived in crisis and others have buckled, and no other event in recent memory has done a better job at highlighting the disruptive role of technology. So my next question is, before that, let me just check the chat. Okay. So my next question is, what are some challenges encountered in implementing your ideas or technologies in Singapore?
Yeah. So yeah, I think in terms of the challenges themselves, for COVID actually is I would say those challenges are pretty much, I think, mitigated because a lot of it is you can actually get a lot of support in terms of from the government and also to do the clinical trial itself. I think let's say moving forward for the other diseases, if without the support from the government, it might be difficult to roll out even to do this kind of clinical trials because the clinical trials itself are typically quite time consuming and also very very resource heavy. So you can expect to spend several millions or just to get the validation done for the clinical trial itself. But we are very fortunate, in terms of COVID, we are able to basically get this part sponsored. Yeah. So I would say actually to run the clinical trial is probably one of the hardest thing to do for any medical device. But perhaps the key thing that you want to do to overcome this is really to secure strategic partners. And this could be maybe private hospital or it could be governmental hospitals. And I think the only way to do this is that if you can basically win over a key opinion leader in that particular industry that you're trying to disrupt. Yeah, so I think that would be the way to really move forward.
Yes, I agree that clinical trials is an extremely expensive endeavor, and I think a lot of companies, a lot of health tech startups are also, I would say, investing a lot of interest, hoping to get shareholders' interest into sponsoring their clinical trials. Moving on, it seems like we have more questions from the floor. So could I get the question IC to flash our first question? Okay, so the question is, hi, Mr. Wayne, what would you say is essential for good innovation in healthcare?
So I would say that actually the thing about healthcare is a little bit different from all your kind of your IT software solution because really I think all the software solution you can kind of try to identify what is a problem and then kind of work backwards. It's kind of the design thinking way of doing it. But I would think for healthcare is really much harder because you kind of have to find out, what are the existing technology that is already there, and then you basically use this technology to find problems. So for healthcare, I think it's much harder compared to if you're talking about like kind of a normal, I guess, software or kind of a consumer kind of product, where you will kind of do a design thinking way where you have a problem first and then you find a solution, work backwards. So I think that's something you need to really think about when you're looking at healthcare. In terms of, it's very hard to define what is a good innovation, I would say. I guess um, one is to find, if you already have an existing technology that you think might be useful, then you have to go and validate it with clinicians or maybe even oncologists to ask them, do they see that there's any good use case, for this particular technology that you have in mind. But I would think that for healthcare is a little bit more tricky in the sense that it's really the technology that's trying to find the solution rather than the other way around.
Right. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Wayne, and I hope it helped answer Ruth's question. So could we get the next question onto the screen, please? So this is a question by Benson. What are your top tips for launching a startup in the tumultuous COVID landscape?
So I think definitely there are some businesses that would do better during this COVID period compared to other kind of businesses. So I think actually what I did at a sideline for myself even was to actually help some companies basically set up their own e-commerce site, like a retail shop. So a lot of those shops where they don't really have a website, or maybe it could be the F&B where they don't have a website. So actually, as a side hustle, like several months ago, I actually helped to set up some of these e-commerce site for these businesses and also basically earn additional pocket money for myself. So I think if you can find these kind of opportunities and you just look out for such things, there's definitely a lot of these kind of opportunity around.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wayne. And it's very touching to hear that you're also trying to help other aspiring entrepreneurs to get their startups going. And entrepreneurship is definitely not an easy task. So I feel that every entrepreneur will appreciate all the help that they can get. So with our next question, can we get the next question up? Okay, so this is a question from Kendrick on Zoom. What was your vision when you decided to join as a co-founder of Breathonix?
So actually, when I first joined, they haven't really started on COVID yet. Only very initial results. But what drew me was actually the potential for lung cancer detection. And when I did some research, actually I found that there was no way of early screening for lung cancer. In fact, if you were to do your CT scan, the accuracy on a CT scan for early stage lung cancer is only between like 60 to 70% kind of accuracy. But then when they were basically presenting their result to me in terms of their initial study for lung cancer, they were able to achieve a 90% sorry, not 90, 80% accuracy for their lung cancer study. And so that was actually very, very impressive to me. And and I really wanted to see how I could also join a team to benefit society as a whole when it comes to such medtech technology.
Right, thank you, Mr. Wayne. And actually, this question leads me on to another question that I have. So, like moving forward, are there any plans for Breathonix to extend the current technology for the diagnosis of other diseases besides lung cancer?
So we are looking at various diseases. We are looking at other forms of cancer and also things like TB and also future infectious disease. Because with our current breath test system itself, we are detecting a few hundred of these what we call volatile organic compounds, which is your VOC biomarkers. And we are able to basically just do a software upgrade to actually detect the various diseases. So imagine next time when you go and do your annual health screening, you just need to do a breath test as well, and you are able to test for a dozen other diseases all at the same time, just with a single breath. And after that, you can basically the oncologist will recommend to you other follow-up studies if you are at risk of any of the diseases. Yeah, so that's really I think our end goal and the vision that we have in the long run.
Oh, I see. So the system that you have created will be can be applied for other diseases, and it would definitely be a extra bonus for healthcare and for doctors to diagnose very troublesome diseases like tuberculosis. So without further ado, let's flash the next question from Qi Huang. So this is a question from Qi Huang. For a healthcare solution that requires large amount of patient data for training machine learning model, what will be the best way to go about doing it?
Yeah, I think the trick here will really to find a strategic clinical partner that you can work with. I think in Singapore it's really very tricky. So like for example, for us for COVID, we actually went to Dubai. So for AI, we are looking to get at least 500 positive cases if you want to have an AI model basically. So that is something that I think is pretty tricky to do in Singapore. So you definitely do need to do your trials overseas.
Oh, I see. And it's definitely a challenge that every health tech startup will face to find the number of people to participate in the clinical trials. And it seems like clinical trials is the biggest barrier for healthcare. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say that perhaps you can do like a what they call a POC, like a proof of concept, in Singapore, where you can tap on working either tap on grants or you work with the governmental hospitals to do the trial for you. And once you have the proof of concept done, then you go on to do the larger studies overseas. I think that would be the most strategic way if you are based in Singapore. Yeah.
I see. And when you apply your technology for other diseases like tuberculosis, and this your organization will be using this method as well.
Yeah.
So let me check for any more questions. Okay, so it seems like, oh yeah, there's one more question coming in from Lisa. What would you say is one of the biggest lessons you have learned as an entrepreneur?
That's a very big question. um, I would say what's the biggest lesson? I say that definitely. I think when the first part, I think when you are starting off is more of doing some form of market validation to figure out, in terms of your product, is there do people really want your product? And once you have some kind of traction and start to kick off, the next difficult thing they need to do is really kind of prioritizing in terms of how do you want to go to market in terms of who do you want to secure as your main few initial customers. I would think that definitely I think earlier, like I mentioned, if you identify who are the key opinion leaders in the space, that is probably one of the biggest thing that or one of the key success factor that you probably need to do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wayne, for your answer. And yes, I agree that entrepreneurship is something that you cannot do alone, and you pretty much need the help of others to bring it along. And as mentioned, it's very touching to see that you're also trying to help other entrepreneurs along on their way. So once again, let me ask the floor for any last questions. Oh, yes, we have one more question from Ruth. With the many barriers to overcome in using technology to aid healthcare issues such as the ones you have just mentioned, do you have encouragement for us who have small ideas which seem very far away from being anything substantial?
I would say, yeah, I mean, definitely, like for healthcare, you don't only have to look at deep tech technology. I think if you look at um, I always get inspired by this idea of how simple ideas can also go very far. For example, for the guys, in a urinal there's this like this guy actually put in basically a fly in the urinal so that the guys will basically aim properly, it will not pee all over the place. And that guy actually patented that technology to put a fly in the urinal itself. So you can imagine such a simple idea, could actually help to solve major problems. And yeah, I mean, he's also getting something, a small royalty for every single fly that you see in the toilet. So I mean, such simple ideas can also go quite a long way.
I see. I didn't know that as well, and it does show that any ideas, big or small, can have varying amounts of impact. And I hope that the participants that are going to formulate their ideas for this hackathon will be daring to propose whatever ideas they have. Yep. So yes, we have one more question from Yu Hui. Hi, Mr. Wayne. Let's say there is another product similar to yours is in development. What would be your way of dealing with the scenario?
Yeah. So I mean, I can just kind of call it out. So there is another breath test company in Singapore, and there's a Saber factory actually. So that's actually from the NTU team that is working. So I think firstly, it really depends on the scenario. For us right now in the COVID space, I don't think you need to see each other as a competitor, because I think in this whole COVID place, there is the demand for testing is really huge. So I would say that if you can find a way, it'd be better if you can perhaps even collaborate together to see how can you kind of work together, or find some kind of synergy where you can help each other to really solve like the world problem, rather than to think of it as a competition itself. Yeah.
Yes, I agree that competition is not necessarily bad, and competition can be good because it can motivate the parties involved to keep improving on their product and keep innovating, so that it is good motivation to keep improving so that they can create an even better product that has a greater effect on the community as a whole. So we have another question from Monica. Hi, Mr. Wayne, what drives you? For example, some instances in which you felt immense fulfillment from your work.
Yeah, I think I think I feel, for me, I think every day when I wake up, I'm already very excited to do what I'm doing. And I think that's because I think as early as like 15 years old, right, I was really very excited to want to do kind of some form of entrepreneurship. But then when I was growing up, basically the kind of resource was not really given to you. So I already had like a lot of ideas that I wanted to try to implement and all that. But I wasn't really given any of this support and resource. It's only in university where such support and resource is really given to you. So when I was given that opportunity, basically, I was really very excited to jump on board, and yeah, and basically I have no regrets. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. And yes, NUS has a lot of channels where budding entrepreneurs can tap into to help them expand on their ideas and help them bring their ideas into fruition. So we have another question from YouTube. So what are the success metrics you have identified in your entrepreneurial journey, and how do you achieve these success metrics?
Yeah, I would think that depending on what industry you're in, everyone will be a bit different. So I mean, if you're talking specifically for medtech, definitely you want to get the approval. That will be one of the key milestones. And then the next one is in terms of how can you secure your first few key customers. If you're able to do that successfully, then the rest of the journey will be much easier.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Mr. Wayne. And it seems like we'll be running short of time. So I would like to ask the floor if they have any more questions. Yes, our project director has a question. Do you have any tips for our participants?
Yeah, I would say definitely, just try to think out of the box, be curious. You really won't know what are the possible solutions out there. I think for this particular kind of competition is more of like you have a problem and you're discovering what possible solutions there can be. So I would say don't limit yourself in terms of your conventional solutions that you can think of. Try thinking of something that possibly from another industry where you can actually adapt that technology for medical use. Yeah, maybe that would be something that someone else have never thought of.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wayne, for taking your time down to give the participants of Beyond Health Hack an insight of your entrepreneurship journey. And I hope everyone who has tuned in had a fruitful session. And we hope to see you in our next Founders Club, which will be happening on Thursday. Once again, thank you, Mr. Wayne, for coming down to attend our event. And I hope everyone. Sorry. Seems like we have one more question from Monica. So, have you come across any situation in which necessary profit compromises your health organization's purpose and values?
Mm, can you rephrase this question? I'm not sure how to answer this.
So I would say like this. She's asking, if let's say your organization faces a deal or a deal breaker that can compromise your purpose and values, like maybe something that can bring in monetary profits, but in the process it can like when you have to choose between profit and moral purpose.
I mean, for us, I think it's especially for a healthcare company. I think the moral purpose in terms of integrity and making sure that all those things are put in place. And you don't. I think like we have things like the quality management system, the QMS in place to make sure that there are certain SOP or certain standards that's already put in place that holds up I would say the integrity of the company. I think that is very, very important, especially in the medical space, because that's how I think a lot of fraud in that sense could potentially happen if you don't have proper governance or integrity set in place. And I think definitely some might be tempted in terms of profit, and then they compromise on all these things. So for us, I think it's very important that we uphold this and perhaps even say no to certain profit or to hold it back until we got further validation, and then we go after that. I think for us that's why for us we actually take a little longer to do the clinical trials and all that, because we wanted to make sure that we had all these quality management system all put in place first before we basically roll out our solution.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wayne. And I totally agree that integrity is one of the most, if not the most important values that anyone involved in healthcare should be should be aware of, because whatever you do has an impact on someone else's life.
Yeah.
So yeah, once again, I would like to thank Mr. Wee for coming down tonight and everyone who is tuning in for participating. And just another reminder, our next Founders Club will be on Thursday at 8 p.m. And thank you once again for attending. And I hope everyone has a good night.